So, for the better part of the last decade, I feel like the universal foolproof advice for any kind of career security was just this three-word mantra, right?
Yeah.
Learn to code.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was the gold standard.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that was it. If you understood the syntax of the machines, if you could just, speak their language, you were basically insulated from all the economic turbulence that was sort of hollowing out other industries.
You were the builder. You were safe.
Exactly. You were the builder.
Right.
But I mean, looking at the current economic landscape, that very specific piece of advice feels almost, I don't know, quaint today.
It really does. It's aged terribly in just a few years.
Yeah, because we've entered this phase where the machines have learned to code themselves. They write their own copy, they synthesize their own research, and it's triggered this pervasive, like almost a background radiation level of anxiety in every office environment I walk into.
The anxiety is palpable for sure.
It's that constant nagging question, like,
Yeah.
is this new wave of artificial intelligence going to render my specific set of skills completely obsolete?
And, it is a completely valid anxiety because of the fundamental nature of the threat has changed so drastically.
How do you mean, like structurally?
Yeah, and structurally.
Yeah.
In previous technological revolutions, we were primarily automating physical exertion, right? Or highly structured, repetitive data entry. We were building stronger tractors and faster calculators.
Right, muscle and math.
Exactly,
Yeah.
muscle and math. But today, we are automating cognitive tasks. We're automating synthesis. And that creates a terrifying ambiguity for knowledge workers who previously felt totally secure.
Because the goalposts completely shifted overnight.
They've vanished entirely. The old heuristics for what makes a valuable employee are collapsing, and people are desperately trying to apply industrial-era career metrics to a post-industrial generative AI reality.
Yeah.
And it's simply just doesn't map.
Which is exactly why all those traditional corporate platitudes about, upskilling or finding synergy with AI, they feel so incredibly hollow right now.
So hollow. They're basically meaningless buzzwords.
Right. They don't actually tell you what to do on a Tuesday morning at your desk. But that actually brings us to the core of today's deep dive. And honestly, it's the reason I really wanted to tear into this specific source material today.
Yeah, let's unpack this because we have something tangible today.
We do. We aren't doing vague platitudes today. We have our hands on a very concrete, highly structured framework drawn from our sources, which conceptualizes this whole new reality as the AI era income pyramid.
The income pyramid. I love this framework.
It's a blueprint, basically, that maps out exactly how human value is being stratified right now. And our mission today is to explain exactly how you, the listener, can climb it.
Stratification is the crucial word there, I think. Because if we connect this to the bigger picture and look at the core thesis of the framework, it actively dismantles that doom and gloom narrative that AI is just this monolithic job killer.
Oh, totally. It's not just a scythe cutting everything down.
Right. The arrival of generative AI hasn't eradicated the need for human value.
Yeah.
Instead, it has aggressively reorganized it into distinct vertical layers.
Like an actual pyramid.
Exactly like a pyramid. And those layers, and more importantly, the corresponding income you can command within them, they're no longer dictated by how much information you can retain or how fast you can type. They are dictated entirely by the precise nature of your relationship with the algorithm.
Right. So it shifts the focus completely away from asking, what is the AI capable of? Because honestly, that's a moving target we have absolutely zero control over.
A target that changes every Tuesday with a new model drop.
Seriously. So it changes the question to, how do I choose to position myself around the AI's output? Which, that puts the agency right back on the individual.
Gives you a roadmap.
It does. So for you listening, by the end of this deep dive, you are going to know exactly where you currently sit on this pyramid and the specific skills you need to reach the top. We're going to deconstruct it layer by layer.
The climb is entirely feasible, but I do want to warn people, it demands a fairly radical cognitive pivot.
A pivot. How so?
Well, the prevailing mindset for most of the 20th and early 21st century was to view a job as a sequence of tasks to be executed. Just knocking things off a checklist.
Right. Show up, do the thing, go home.
Exactly. But to move up this new pyramid, you have to stop viewing your work as execution and start viewing it as a hierarchy of judgment, architecture, and ultimately risk-taking.
A hierarchy of judgment. I really want to hold on to that concept as we build this out. But to understand the upward trajectory, we first have to examine the basement, right? We have to look at the foundation of the pyramid, which the source categorizes as the people who are already falling behind.
Yes, the foundational layer.
So the lowest tier is explicitly labeled the replaced by AI layer. Let's ground this a bit. What does that actually look like in a contemporary corporate setting? Because we aren't talking about assembly line robot arms here.
No, not at all. We are talking about white-collar execution. This foundational layer is populated by individuals whose professional equity is tied entirely to executing predictable strategies.
Or like moving information from point A to point B.
Exactly. Moving information using digital tools. The source actually provides a very mundane, yet perfectly illustrative example of this. It brings up the creation of meeting minutes.
Taking the minutes, it's so fascinating because historically, being the person taking the minutes in a high-level executive meeting, that was actually seen as a position of real proximity and
Oh,
trust.
absolutely. You were in the room where it happened.
Right, you were in the room, but your cognitive function in that room was, well, it was severely restricted, wasn't it?
Think about the actual mechanics of that task. You have a room full of directors and VPs debating a really complex quarterly strategy. The person assigned to take the minutes is not engaged in that strategic debate at all.
They're just typing frantically.
Right. Their entire mental bandwidth is completely consumed by acting as a human transcription service. They're listening to audio, translating it into text, and trying to capture the chronological flow of information. They're just a conduit.
They're essentially a tape recorder with a pulse.
A tape recorder with a pulse. I like that. Their value in that specific hour is entirely mechanical, not analytical.
And the framework argues quite bluntly that this specific function is now completely obsolete.
Totally obsolete. Because why on earth would an organization pay a human salary for transcription when any executive can just initiate a meeting software plugin?
Right, a plugin that not only perfectly transcribes the audio in real time, but instantly synthesizes the debate.
Yes. It isolates the key decisions and automatically emails the action items to the relevant departments before the meeting has even officially concluded.
Before they even stand up from the table. So the human being whose identity and value were anchored to that specific predictable execution, they've been neatly replaced by a button.
Replaced by a button.
Yeah.
Because if your primary output doesn't require independent synthesis or critical pushback, if you are just the frictionless pipe through which data flows, you're basically entering a direct foot race with a machine.
And a machine processes data at a scale and speed that biological brains simply cannot match. You lose that race every single time.
Every time.
But, the framework gets much more insidious when it moves to the tier slightly above outright replacement. The source refers to this next level up as the used by AI tier.
Ah, yes. The used by AI tier. This is arguably the most dangerous layer of the pyramid
Why dangerous? It sounds a little better than being replaced.
because it creates this massive false sense of security.
Mm-hmm.
People in the used by AI tier believe they're safe because they are the ones operating the technology.
Oh, right. They're at the keyboard.
Exactly. They're typing in the prompts. They feel like they're in the driver's seat.
Mm.
But the reality is that they have completely abdicated their critical thinking to the model.
So they initiate the request, but they just blindly swallow the output.
They treat the machine's first draft as the final, unassailable truth. They become a middleman for the algorithm.
A middleman. Wow. I really want to dig into the real-world example the source uses for this because it's brilliant and it highlights a systemic breakdown that's happening right now.
The entry sheets example.
Yes, the university students writing entry sheets. So for listeners who might not be totally familiar with the Japanese corporate context our source is pulling from, an entry sheet isn't just a basic resume. It's a highly formalized, culturally significant document.
It's massive. It's a comprehensive cover letter, application, and personal essay all rolled into one.
Right. And it has traditionally been the primary filtering mechanism for major corporations to gauge a candidate's personality, their grit, and, their authentic motivation for joining that specific company.
It was essentially the ultimate test of individual differentiation in a really highly competitive job market.
Exactly. But observe the behavioral shift that generative AI has triggered here. You have thousands of university students who are highly incentivized to be efficient.
And who perhaps feel a little insecure about their own persuasive writing abilities.
Of course. So they turn to large language models. They input a prompt, something like, write an entry sheet for this specific banking corporation, highlight my major in economics, and express deep admiration for their new sustainability initiative.
And the model, which is fundamentally just a prediction engine designed to produce highly plausible, grammatically perfect text, generates a masterpiece of corporate speak.
It spits out a document that looks, structurally at least, like the perfect application.
It looks perfect on a surface level. The student reads it, feels a wave of relief, copies it, pastes it, and hits submit.
Boom. Done in 30 seconds.
Done. But they have exerted absolutely zero cognitive friction. They just let the algorithm speak on their behalf. And this is where we see the profound consequence of the use by AI tier.
Because it's not just one student doing this.
No, it's tens of thousands of students doing the exact same thing, using roughly the same prompts on the exact same underlying foundational models. So the entire data pool has been completely homogenized.
The source points out the tragic comedy of this, right? Suddenly, every single application the recruiters receive features the exact same phrasing.
It's absurd. Every sheet says, I conducted a deep analysis of your corporate homepage, or, I was profoundly moved by the CEO's recent blog post regarding future paradigms.
It's just the complete homogenization of human thought. I mean, imagine being the hiring manager on the receiving end of that pipeline.
It must be mind-numbing.
Right. The first time you read that perfectly crafted, slightly overly formal paragraph about the CEO's vision, you probably think, wow, this candidate is really polished and proactive.
But by the time you read the exact same sentiment with the exact same syntactic cadence on the 50th application,
A very chilling realization sets in. You realize you aren't communicating with human applicants anymore. You are just reading variations of the same algorithm's output. The human beings have effectively erased themselves from the process.
and this leads to the structural collapse the source highlights. The companies are realizing that the data they're receiving is utterly corrupted.
The signal is gone.
Exactly. The entry sheet no longer serves its primary function, which was to act as a proxy for human personality and authentic drive. Because the applicants have blindly accepted the AI's perfect output, the output has lost all signal. It's just noise.
So what are the companies doing?
Well, consequently, major corporations are beginning to completely abolish the entry sheet process. They are throwing out the system entirely because the people using it have turned themselves into meat proxies for the AI.
Meat proxies. Wow. That dynamic actually reminds me of a phenomenon that happens with GPS navigation, which I think perfectly illustrates the danger of this tier.
Oh, the driving into a lake analogy.
Yes. We've all heard the stories, or maybe experienced a mild version of it ourselves, where someone is driving late at night in an unfamiliar area, and the GPS on their dashboard says, turn right in 100 feet.
And the driver, completely trusting the digital authority of the system, just turns right.
And drives their car straight into a lake, or like onto a set of train tracks.
It's the phenomenon of cognitive outsourcing.
Exactly that. And why does that happen? It's not because the driver is inherently foolish. It happens because the moment they turned on the GPS, they subtly changed their relationship with their environment.
They stop looking out the windshield.
They stopped processing the sensory input of the road, the lack of pavement, the reflection of the water. They completely outsourced their spatial judgment to a glowing screen. They allowed themselves to be used by the navigation system.
That analogy perfectly captures the trap.
Right, because in the context of this economic pyramid, if you're sitting at your desk generating reports or writing code or drafting emails using AI, and you aren't applying rigorous contextual friction to that output.
If you aren't looking out the windshield of your own common sense and industry experience.
Yes, you are just driving the car into the lake, you cease to be a valuable independent asset to your company, and you literally become a vulnerability. You're just a biological cursor clicking approve on whatever the machine spits out.
The base tiers of the pyramid, the replaced and the used, they are defined entirely by an absence of friction. In a world where generative AI makes the production of average, plausible content practically free and instantaneous, the frictionless human is economically worthless.
Economically worthless. So the only way to step up, the only way to climb out of the danger zone is to reintroduce valuable human friction into the workflow.
Precisely. Which gives us a very clear pivot point.
Okay, so if blind execution and mindless acceptance are the quicksand at the bottom of the pyramid, how do we pull ourselves out? We have to stop being the pipe and stop being the middleman.
You step up by fundamentally changing your posture toward the generated output. We have to become the filter. According to the sources framework, the first major step up the pyramid is into the evaluator tier.
The evaluator tier.
Yeah, in the original Japanese text, this is referred to as hyukahin, which translates to someone who assesses, critiques, or evaluates a product or outcome. You transition from being an executor to being a critic.
I'm going to push back on that slightly because in traditional corporate environments, being quote-unquote just a critic is often viewed pretty negatively, right?
Oh, for sure. It's usually seen as a very passive role.
Yeah. The person who just sits there pointing out flaws without generating original ideas is usually considered a bottleneck, not a high-value asset. So why does this framework suddenly elevate the critic to a protected tier?
It's a vital distinction to make. In the pre-AI era, generation, the actual creation of the draft, the code, the plan, that was the expensive, time-consuming part of the process.
Staring at the blank page.
Right. Therefore, creators were highly valued. Critiquing was secondary. But generative AI flips that economic equation totally on its head. Generation is now cheap, fast, and basically infinite.
So the bottleneck shifted.
Exactly. The bottleneck is no longer creation. The bottleneck is quality control. The bottleneck is accuracy, relevance, and cultural resonance.
Okay, that makes sense. So an evaluator in this tier might not be the visionary who designs a brilliant strategy entirely from scratch.
Right. But when an AI system or even a junior employee relying on AI presents a fully formed proposal, the evaluator possesses the capacity to look at that perfectly formatted document and say, this isn't quite right.
Or, more importantly, as the source notes, this doesn't fit our company's specific cultural stance.
Exactly. They catch the vibe, essentially.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics of that judgment. Because an LLM can check its own logic, right? It can check its own grammar. What is the human evaluator seeing that the machine cannot see?
They are seeing the friction between theoretical logic and practical reality. We really have to remember how these models are trained. They're trained on vast oceans of text. They have all the data in the world, but they have absolutely zero real-world experience.
Zero.
And AI has never sat in a tense negotiation where the other party is operating in bad faith. It has never launched a product during a recession. It has never felt the subtle shift in a room when a client feels insulted.
It has the data, but it doesn't have the scars.
I love that. Yes, it lacks the contextual scars of lived corporate and human experience. So, an AI can synthesize a strategy that is 100% mathematically and logically sound on paper.
But the human evaluator, drawing on a reservoir of historical intuition and unquantifiable experience, can look at that logically perfect plan and recognize that it will be an absolute disaster in practice.
Exactly. Let's ground this with a scenario, actually.
Yeah.
Look at how that friction between logic and reality plays out.
Let's do it. What's the scenario?
Imagine a situation where a regional bank uses an AI tool to generate a new customer retention strategy. The AI analyzes years of transaction data, churn rates, and demographic profiles.
All the numbers.
All the numbers. And based purely on optimizing for short-term revenue retention, the AI outputs a strategy suggesting the bank aggressively cross-sell high-interest credit products to a specific demographic. Let's say older, long-term account holders who have high cash balances but very low credit utilization.
Okay, from a purely mathematical standpoint, the math checks out. The probability of an immediate revenue spike is really high.
Right. But a veteran branch manager operating as the evaluator here looks at that AI-generated rollout plan. The manager knows this specific demographic of customers personally.
They've talked to them for years.
Exactly. The manager knows that these customers value trust and stability above all else, and that aggressively pushing debt products on them won't just fail. It will deeply offend them.
It'll cause them to move their life savings to a competitor completely out of spite.
Precisely. The AI saw a highly probable revenue vector. The evaluator saw a catastrophic breach of brand trust.
That is a phenomenal distinction. The AI is optimizing for a localized metric revenue, but it is entirely blind to the broader, messier human ecosystem.
And the source makes a really interesting point here about the nature of this critique. The evaluator doesn't necessarily have to jump in and rewrite the entire strategy themselves.
Right, and that has to be a huge relief for many professionals.
Huge. The evaluator doesn't need to instantly possess the perfect alternative solution. They don't have to be the genius who pulls a flawless new campaign out of thin air.
Their immense value lies simply in their ability to pump the brakes.
Yes, their ability to throw a flag on the play and say, based on my 10 years in this industry, if we execute this AI-generated plan exactly as written, it will backfire.
They serve as the firewall between synthetic logic and human reality. It's essentially the monetization of human taste and judgment.
The monetization of taste. That's a great way to frame it.
It actually reminds me a lot of the film industry. Think about it. You have the people who shoot the raw footage. That's the generation phase. But the movie isn't made on set. It's made in the editing room.
Oh, absolutely. The edit is everything.
Right. The editor doesn't generate the footage, but they have the taste, the pacing, the rhythm to look at hours of raw tape and say, cut this, keep this, move this here.
But an AI is basically an infinite footage generator now.
Exactly. The AI can generate 1,000 variations of a marketing email in 10 seconds. The value is no longer in the generation of those 1,000 emails. The value is entirely vested in the human who has the refined taste to look at those variations and accurately select the single one that will actually resonate with the psychological state of the customer base.
It is active curation versus blind acceptance. When you operate as an evaluator, you're no longer serving the machine. You are auditing it.
You're using your human friction to carve utility out of all that noise.
Yeah.
And that is what keeps you safe from the baseline replacement.
Yes, that secures your foothold on the pyramid.
Okay, so becoming a discerning editor, an evaluator with good taste and battle scars, establishes a solid defensive perimeter around your career. But our mission today is to climb.
We have to keep climbing.
So the source material outlines a major transition point here, moving from the middle tiers to the upper middle tiers. And it anchors this with a very specific financial benchmark, an annual income of 10 million yen or more.
Which is a very significant shift in influence and compensation.
Right, so if critiquing the AI keeps you safe, what pushes you into this higher echelon?
To cross that 10 million yen threshold, you have to undergo another huge cognitive shift. You have to move from reacting to what is in front of you, to conceptualizing what is completely missing.
Transitioning from the evaluator to what?
To what the source labels the designer or the architect tier. In the Japanese text, the terms are design for design and seikei for architecture or planning.
Now, when we say designer here, I feel like we need to be very clear that we aren't talking about aesthetics, right? We aren't talking about making the PowerPoint look pretty.
Not at all. We were talking about high-level structural and conceptual design. The designer is the individual who can architect entirely new organizations.
They're the ones who can structure new, complex business models from the ground up.
Exactly. They establish unprecedented sales channels or conceptualize new product ecosystems from absolute zero.
So it's the shift from editing the document to building the company that the document actually serves.
That's the leap. If the evaluator is dealing with completed things, a draft, a plan, a piece of code that was handed to them for review, the designer is dealing with the void. They are operating in the space of creating things that do not currently exist in the world.
Okay, I have to pause and challenge this, though, because if we look at the trajectory of AI capabilities just over the last year alone, it is getting remarkably good at structural generation.
It is getting very fast, yes.
If I go to an advanced LLM right now and prompt it with, say, design a comprehensive 3-year business plan for a direct-to-consumer, ethically sourced coffee brand, including supply chain logistics, target demographics, and a phased marketing rollout, it will spit out a highly structured, surprisingly robust 40-page blueprint in about 30 seconds.
It will. It'll look incredibly professional.
Right. So if the AI can architect a business model that quickly, why is the human designer tier still commanding that massive premium value? Aren't the architects at risk too?
It's a great question, and it's actually the most common misunderstanding about where we currently are with AI. It completely conflates the ability to assemble with the ability to intend.
Okay, break that down for me. Assemble versus intend.
Yes. The AI can generate a remarkably detailed business plan based on your prompt. It can arrange all the logistical supply chain data and format the marketing rollout beautifully. But the AI cannot want to build an ethically sourced coffee company.
Ah, the machine has no intent.
It has no agency, it has no internal drive, no vision, and no abstract goal.
Yeah.
The AI is a purely reactive engine. It fundamentally requires a visionary prompter to give it direction.
So it needs the spark.
Right. To use an analogy.
Right.
Imagine the AI as the most skilled, tireless bricklayer in human history.
Yeah.
It has access to an infinite repository of the world's finest bricks, and it can lay them with mathematical perfection at literal lightning speed.
Okay.
But if you just drop this super bricklayer in an empty field, it will do absolutely nothing. It doesn't know if it's supposed to be building a cathedral, a bridge, or a fortress.
It requires the blueprint. It requires the architect to draw the lines in the dirt first.
Exactly. The human designer is the architect of intent. The designer looks at the empty field, which is the market landscape, and synthesizes a multitude of abstract, complex human goals.
Like what? What kind of goals?
Well, perhaps it's a desire to disrupt a stagnant monopoly, or a passionate personal drive for sustainable agriculture, or just a desperate strategic need to pivot a legacy company before it goes bankrupt.
Human motivations.
Yes. The designer can seize the why and the overarching what. They define the boundary conditions of the whole ecosystem. Then, and only then, do they deploy the AI to figure out the granular how. They use it to supply the bricks and the mortar to fill in the structure they have already conceptualized.
That makes total sense, and it perfectly delineates the power dynamic we're talking about. In the used by AI tier, the human is subservient to the tool's output. But in the designer tier, the human remains the undisputed master of the technology.
The AI is relegated to its proper place as a highly efficient commodity.
So if you can walk into a messy corporate environment, identify a massive structural inefficiency, conceptualize a completely new departmental workflow to solve it, and then use AI agents to rapidly draft the specific job descriptions, process maps, and software requirements for that new department, you are operating as a designer.
You're creating the ecosystem from zero.
And that specific capability, the ability to conceptualize from zero, to organize disparate resources, human capital, and technological tools into a coherent, completely novel structure, that's inherently scarce, isn't it?
Incredibly scarce. It requires a level of abstract, systems-level thinking and long-term strategic foresight that predictive language models simply do not and currently cannot possess.
That is why it commands the 10 million yen premium. You are building the engine, not just checking the oil.
Precisely. Building the engine.
Okay, so architecting systems, designing ecosystems from zero, that gets you to a highly respected, lucrative position on the pyramid. I think most professionals would be pretty ecstatic to reach the designer tier and just, set up camp there.
It's a very comfortable camp.
Right, but the framework doesn't stop there. The source material outlines one final elite level, the apex.
The absolute peak of the pyramid.
And the source anchors this apex with a towering financial benchmark of 50 million yen and above. We are talking about the extreme upper echelon of influence and compensation here. It categorizes the individuals who occupy this rarefied air as disruptive innovators.
Disruptive innovators.
Yes. So if architecting systems gets you to the upper middle, what kind of cognitive leap is required to reach the actual summit?
This is where the framework introduces a massive counterintuitive paradox.
I love a good paradox. Lay it on me.
Well, we've spent this entire discussion talking about how to effectively work with AI, right? How to audit it, how to direct it. But to reach the absolute peak of the AI era income pyramid, you essentially have to operate in direct opposition to the fundamental architecture of artificial intelligence.
Wait, let me make sure I'm hearing this right. To win the ultimate prize in the AI era, you have to do the exact opposite of what the AI does.
Yes, exactly the opposite. And to understand why, we really have to elevate our understanding of how these models actually function under the hood. As the source material points out, generative AI is built on large language models. And how do LLMs generate their output?
Math, right. Statistics.
Exactly. They do not think. They don't have sudden, brilliant flashes of inspiration. They are trained on unimaginably massive data sets, essentially the entire digitized history of human text.
All the books, all the articles, all the code.
Everything. And based on all of that historical data, they map out probability distributions. Their singular function is to predict the most statistically likely sequence of words, or the most statistically probable solution to a problem, based on what has happened in the past.
So they are looking at the vast landscape of historical data and basically finding the most common, well-worn path through it.
Precisely. And in statistical terms, what happens when you constantly optimize for the highest probability across a massive data set?
You get the average.
You get regression to the mean. You get the average. Because AI is entirely reliant on historical consensus, it is fundamentally engineered to output safe, inoffensive, historically validated ideas.
So if you ask an AI to design a marketing strategy for a new beverage, it will give you a synthesis of the most successful beverage campaigns of the last 20 years.
It will give you the most probable path to a standard baseline level of success.
Wow. So despite all the hype about AI being creative, it is actually the ultimate engine of conformity. It is high-speed mediocrity.
High-speed mediocrity, exactly.
Exactly.
It can give you the absolute best version of what has already been done, but it cannot, by its very mathematical nature, produce a truly unique, unprecedented concept.
Because if a concept is truly unprecedented, if it has literally never been tried before, there is no historical data in the model's training set to support it.
Right. The AI cannot predict an anomaly. And that is exactly where the disruptive innovator lives. The disruptive innovator operates in the statistical long tail, far, far away from the safe average.
They produce ideas that actively defy common sense, conventional wisdom, and historical data.
Yes. The source actually illustrates this with a really compelling narrative about the world of high-end consulting.
Oh, yeah, let's dive into that story because I think it brings this abstract concept of risk into very sharp relief.
It's a perfect illustration of the tension between logic and disruption. So the expert referenced in our source material, who operates in these very high-level consulting circles, shares a profound internal dilemma.
What's the dilemma?
They describe what happens when a major corporate client comes to them and pitches a wild, completely unprecedented, highly risky idea for a new business venture, like a true moonshot.
An idea that breaks basically all the established rules of their industry.
Right. And the consultant notes that their immediate knee-jerk reaction, which is entirely driven by their training, their logic, and their deep reliance on historical market data, is to aggressively try to stop the client.
They want to say, do not do this. The data shows this is a terrible idea.
No company has ever succeeded by attempting this specific maneuver.
Which is exactly what an AI would output.
Exactly.
If you fed that client's wild moonshot idea into an advanced LLM and asked for a risk assessment, the AI would calculate the historical probability of success, recognize that it approaches absolute zero, and output a blaring red warning.
Extreme risk of catastrophic failure. Do not proceed. Here are 5 safer, historically validated alternatives.
Right. The consultant and the AI are both completely bound by the gravity of past data.
They are both operating as highly optimized prediction engines. But the source then reveals the paradox of true disruption. The consultant admits that privately, in the back of their mind, they are thinking, but if this crazy, illogical gamble actually does somehow succeed, it will completely rewrite the rules of the entire industry.
Because the risk is entirely unprecedented, the potential reward is historically unprecedented.
Yes. You can't achieve a 100x return by following a strategy that everyone else has already optimized.
That makes total sense. But as a traditional consultant, bound by professional norms and liability and logical frameworks, they cannot, in good conscience, advise a client to take a massive, statistically illogical gamble.
They are paid to minimize risk, not maximize chaos.
But the disruptive innovator doesn't care about the consultant's risk matrix, and they certainly don't care about the AI's probability distribution.
That is the defining trait of the apex tier. Disruptive innovators are those rare, audacious, perhaps slightly obsessive individuals who are willing to take massive leaps of faith that defy all known data.
They're not trying to optimize an existing process. They're trying to invent a paradigm that does not yet exist.
They're betting their capital, their reputations, and their time on a vision of the future that looks absolutely nothing like the past. And because the AI can only look backward, it can never replicate this forward leap.
I am honestly fascinated by the irony of this. The grand conclusion of the technological age is that to beat the ultimate logic machine, you have to be willing to be wildly, almost irrationally human.
You have to embrace the irrationality.
You really do. You have to be willing to look at a dashboard that says, there is a 99% chance this will fail, and possess the sheer hubris to say, I don't care about the 99%, I'm going to thread the needle on that 1% because if I do, I change the world.
AI can optimize the known universe to near perfection, but it takes a human being to discover a new universe.
Because if you only ever follow logic, you will only ever achieve average results.
Disruption requires a deliberate, forceful break from consensus, and that courage to be statistically wrong in the pursuit of being unprecedentedly right, that is what commands the absolute premium at the apex of the pyramid.
Okay, let's take a breath because we have charted the entire vertical climb here. We start by escaping the trap of mindless execution at the base.
Right.
We move up by becoming sharp evaluators, using the friction of our experience to audit the machine. We climb higher into the upper middle by becoming designers, architecting complex new systems from zero.
And for the rare few, we reach the apex by acting as disruptive innovators, taking illogical leaps that defy the AI's historical data.
That is the structure.
That is the vertical architecture, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But the framework presented in our source material contains one more critical element. It actually reveals a sort of secret dimension to this entire map.
A secret dimension. Okay, I love a hidden variable. What are we talking about here?
We are talking about a hidden staircase. It's a foundational skill that doesn't just belong to one tier, but is actively required at every single level of this pyramid to ensure your economic survival.
Really? At every level?
Every level. Whether you are an evaluator, a designer, or a disruptor,
Yeah.
if you lack this specific skill, the AI will eventually outmaneuver you. It is the ultimate connective tissue of human value.
Okay, what is the skill?
It is the ability to read context. In the original Japanese text, the term used is bunyaku. It's about navigating the unspoken, messy reality of human interaction.
Reading context. Okay, we touched briefly on human nuance when we discussed the evaluator catching the flawed sales strategy, but this sounds much deeper than that.
It is much deeper.
The source uses a very specific, almost surprisingly mundane example to illustrate this grand concept. Let's talk about the secretary and the flight booking scenario.
It is a brilliant example because it strips away all the high-minded corporate jargon and cuts straight to the core of human psychology.
How so?
Well, the source poses a very simple, logical question. Given the current state of technology, why haven't all executive assistants and secretaries been completely eradicated by automation?
It's a totally fair question. From a purely logical standpoint, booking a flight, managing a calendar, or arranging a car service, these are highly structured, data-driven tasks.
Highly structured.
An AI agent can interface with the airline's API, check the CEO's calendar, optimize for travel time, and book the flight flawlessly, instantly, and for fractions of a penny.
Exactly. If the corporate world operated purely on the axis of logic and efficiency, the human secretary would be entirely extinct by now.
If a CEO needs to travel from Tokyo to London, they should theoretically just speak a sentence into their phone, and the AI handles the rest.
Right. So why is the human assistant still sitting outside the corner office?
Why? What does the human bring to the transaction that the AI doesn't?
Because human executives are not logic machines. They are deeply emotional, status-driven creatures.
Oh, wow.
The source points out a fundamental truth. A boss might rationally know they can book a flight with a digital tool, but emotionally, psychologically, they want a human being to do it for them.
Because it feels different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The human brings deference. The human brings status. It is entirely about ego. The source paints a very vivid picture of an executive who has spent 30 grueling years climbing the corporate ladder.
They survived the politics, they hit their targets.
Right. And they finally secured the massive corner office with the view. They want to enjoy the tangible social trappings of that hard-won success. Having a human being dedicated to managing their logistics, someone who responds to their needs and smooths out their day, is a highly visible marker of their elevated status within the tribe.
Wow. So keeping the human assistant has absolutely nothing to do with logistical efficiency and everything to do with psychological validation.
Precisely. And this mundane example introduces a profound cultural concept from the Japanese source material that we really need to define and unpack for our listeners because it unlocks the entire concept of reading context.
Okay, let's hear it.
It is the dynamic between hon and taitmei.
Han and taitmei. Let's break those terms down because
Yeah.
while they're Japanese terms, the behavior they describe is, it's universally human.
They are fundamental concepts for understanding social and corporate friction. Taite translates roughly to the public facade.
Like the PR statement.
Exactly. It is the stated goal, the official corporate position, the polite fiction we present to the outside world to maintain harmony.
Okay, and the other one?
Hon, on the other hand, is the true feeling. It is the hidden motive, the unspoken desire, the messy, often selfish or irrational emotional reality lurking right beneath the surface.
Okay, let's map that onto our flight booking example. What is the taitmei and what is the Han in that situation?
So, if you ask the CEO why they retain a human assistant, the taitmei, the public facade, will be highly logical. I retain a dedicated assistant to maximize my time efficiency and manage complex scheduling conflicts, which allows me to focus my cognitive bandwidth entirely on high-level strategic vision for the shareholders.
That sounds incredibly professional and optimized. An AI would read that and say, the goal is time efficiency.
Right. The AI takes it at face value, but the true unspoken feeling that the CEO will never, ever put in a press release is, I worked incredibly hard to get to the top, and having someone manage my life makes me feel powerful, important, and respected.
And this right here is where the artificial intelligence hits a brick wall, isn't it?
It completely shatters against it.
Okay.
Because AI only has access to the taitmei. The AI only operates on explicit, digitized data. It can read the corporate handbook. It can read the quarterly efficiency metrics.
But it cannot read the CEO's fragile ego.
It cannot read the ego.
Let's expand on this because it applies to so much more than just executive assistants. How does this Han and taitmei dynamic play out in high-level strategic work, like, say, the designer or disruptor tiers we just discussed?
The expert in our source material explains how critical this is in management consulting. Imagine a major corporation publishes a beautifully designed, highly publicized midterm management plan.
Oh, I've seen hundreds of those.
We all have. It's filled with charts about synergistic growth and digital transformation. That document is pure TapeMe. It's the public face.
So if a mid-level manager takes that public document, feeds it into an advanced AI, and says, design a departmental strategy to achieve these stated goals, what is going to happen?
The strategy will almost certainly fail upon implementation
Why? If it's logically based on the stated goals.
because the AI designed a flawless logical path to achieve the TapeMe, completely unaware of the Han that actually governs the building.
Oh, wow.
The AI doesn't know that the executive team is actually deeply terrified of digital transformation and will passively resist it. The AI doesn't know that there is a bitter, decade-long rivalry between the VP of sales and the CFO, meaning they will never actually share data.
Right.
The AI doesn't know that the CEO's actual unarticulated goal is simply to coast for 2 more years without rocking the boat so they can collect their massive exit package.
This is so painfully accurate. Every single organization on Earth has a shadow structure. The organizational chart pinned to the wall almost never matches the actual flow of power, fear, and influence inside the building.
Never. Human beings are walking contradictions.
We say we want innovation, that's the TapeMe, but our actual budget approvals show a deep, paralyzing fear of risk. That's the Hun. We buy absurdly expensive things not for their utility, but for the status they confer.
And this is exactly why the ability to read context is the ultimate future-proof skill. A successful professional in the AI era, particularly as they climb into those high-earning tiers, must be a master of deciphering the shadow structure.
They have to see the matrix.
Exactly. The consultant in our source material emphasizes that they cannot simply deliver a logical, AI-generated report and walk away. They have to read the room. They have to understand the unwritten, unspoken culture of the client's company.
They have to figure out what the client actually needs to feel safe, not just what the client says they want on a Zoom call.
Yes, and they achieve this by running hypothesis testing through real, messy human conversations. They grab a coffee with a stakeholder, they drop subtle hints, they gauge facial expressions.
They read body language when a certain competitor is mentioned.
Exactly. They are actively mapping the Han to find the actual viable landing spot for a project. They have to navigate the irrational, emotional reality of the organization to find a solution that will actually be accepted by the humans in charge, rather than just the solution that looks best on a spreadsheet.
I am marveling at the implications of this. It exposes the ultimate, perhaps permanent, blind spot of artificial intelligence. Generative AI lacks physical presence. It has no eyes to see the sudden tension in a boardroom when a specific topic is broached.
It has no ears to hear the slight, hesitant quiver in a director's voice when they reluctantly agree to a budget cut.
It cannot read the unspoken power dynamics between two colleagues sitting across a table who refuse to make eye contact. It is entirely deaf and blind to the human context.
It is a machine of pure logic attempting to operate in a world completely governed by messy emotion.
So, synthesizing all of this, what it really means is that as the machines get better at processing data, the premium on human emotional intelligence skyrockets.
It goes through the roof.
Mastering human psychology, learning to decode the hidden motives of the people around you, possessing the empathy and the social agility to navigate the Han of your industry, that is your impenetrable moat against automation.
It's no longer about outcomputing the computer. It's about doubling down on the things that make us fundamentally human.
I think that is a powerful realization for our listeners. It prompts a vital self-audit. If you look at your own career trajectory and your daily interactions, when you succeed, how often is it purely because you had the best data?
Versus how often do you succeed because you understood a colleague's unspoken anxiety and mitigated it?
Right. How often do you close a deal because you recognized a client's hidden ego and validated it? That social friction, that ability to read the room and navigate the unwritten rules is a skill the AI simply cannot replicate.
The higher you climb the pyramid, the less your job is about moving data, and the more it is about navigating the profound complexities of human nature.
This has been a deeply clarifying deep dive. We have taken a framework that could have been just another source of AI anxiety and turned it into a highly actionable blueprint. Before we wrap up, let's crystallize the steps for you listening. We set out to explain how to climb the AI era income pyramid, and we've charted the path.
Let's do the recap.
First, we must aggressively escape the base. We have to stop acting like frictionless pipes, executing predictable tasks, and we absolutely must recognize the danger of the used by AI tier. We cannot be like the students submitting identical homogenized entry sheets, blindly trusting the algorithm and erasing our own personalities in the process.
Right.
Second, We take the crucial first step upward by becoming evaluators. We transition from being executors to being highly discerning critics. We use our battle scars, our industry experience, and our human taste to audit the AI's logical draft and catch the practical, real-world flaws it misses.
We provide the friction.
Third, to break into the high-earning designer tier, we move from critiquing what exists to architecting what doesn't. We act as the visionaries, designing complex systems, organizations, and goals from zero, using AI simply as the bricklayer to execute our blueprints.
Architecting intent.
Fourth, for those aiming for the absolute apex, the disruptive innovators, you have to cultivate the courage to act in direct defiance of the machine's historical averages. You have to be willing to take the massive, illogical leaps of faith that create entirely new paradigms.
Thread the needle.
And finally, the hidden staircase that connects it all. Context. We must master the art of reading the bunyaku. We have to navigate the massive gulf between the tatame, the logical public facade, and the messy, ego-driven, true feelings that actually dictate human behavior.
That is a comprehensive map of the new terrain. It moves the locus of control completely away from the technology and places it firmly back in the hands of the individual professional.
As we close out this deep dive, I want to hand the floor over to you for a final thought. We have spent an hour dissecting logic, probability, and corporate strategy. But as you listening log off and look at your own career tomorrow morning, what is the ultimate takeaway you should carry with you?
I want to leave you with a thought that builds directly on the absurdity of that executive and their flight picking. We spend an enormous amount of our collective energy terrified of the machines. We're terrified that they will become too smart, too efficient, and too perfectly logical, and that this flawless logic will systematically erase our value in the workplace.
It's the ultimate fear right now.
It is. But the ultimate beautiful irony of the AI age, the real secret hidden at the core of this pyramid, is that our jobs and our economic value won't be saved by our logic. They won't be saved by our efficiency or our ability to process data faster. They will be saved by our messy, irrational, ego-driven human flaws.
Wow.
An AI can solve any logical puzzle you give it in seconds, but it will never ever understand why a human being fundamentally needs to feel important. It will never understand the paralyzing fear of failure, the irrational pride of authorship, or the blinding ambition that drives a person to build a company from absolutely nothing. And in that vast, chaotic, beautiful gap between perfect machine logic and fragile human ego, your value as a human professional will always, always survive.
We spend years trying to turn ourselves into perfect, frictionless machines, only to realize that our imperfections are the only things the machines can't copy. The future doesn't belong to the most logical among us. It belongs to the most human.